Greetings, welcome to the Transforming Assessment webinar series for 2023. This is our 13th series. Today's session is by Nathaniel Louwrens and Mark Nichols from Open Polytechnic in New Zealand, which I believe have now merged with their vet sector provider. I can't quite pronounce it, but I'm sure they will do. The topic today is designing enduring assessment for reuse and flexibility. It's a huge topic, and I'm sure it interfaces with the other topic that I won't mention, but we all know what it is. So thanks, Nathaniel and Mark. Would you like to begin the session, please?
Kia ora koutou. Yeah, thanks for coming to listen to us chat about our progress in working towards designing what we're called enduring assessment. We're going to share about our context, what led us to undertake this work, what we came up with, and the outcomes so far.
Nathaniel, your sound is a little bit quiet, so if you can try and maybe get closer to the microphone, that would be good.
Right, hopefully that's better. Okay,
Yes,
just to introduce ourselves, I'm Nathaniel Louwrens, the Manager of Learning Development and Processes at the Open Polytechnic of New Zealand, which is a business division of Te Pūkenga. The work that we're going to share, I undertook with a team in my previous role of Manager of Assessment Design. And with me, I've got Mark. Mark, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, kia ora koutou. Ko Mark Nichols tēnei. I'm Exec Director of Learning Design and Development with Te Pūkenga, part of the Open Polytechnic of New Zealand Business Division. It's good to see some other Open Polytechnic colleagues here as well. So to start off, we thought it would be a really good idea to give you a sense of context, because before getting into the specifics of what we've done, our context actually explains why we've gone down this route. So Nathaniel and I were with Open Polytechnic, a dedicated open distance flexible learning provider, serving learners from right across Aotearoa, New Zealand. As of 1st of January this year, though, we are members of a broader network called Te Pūkenga, the New Zealand Institute of Skills and Technology. So we're now part of the Open Polytechnic business division of Te Pūkenga, and we're being integrated now into that larger organisation. So Te Pūkenga brings together 16 regional polytechnics, including us, and 9 industry training organisations. Now these were all previously competing, but now we're in one dedicated vocational education institute, and it's also the largest higher education provider in New Zealand. We're all being brought together as a result of the New Zealand reform of vocational education, or ROVE, quite a good acronym for it really, because it is roving away at the moment. Well, one of the proposals of the ROVE was to unify programs of study, and the idea behind this was to reduce duplication and also encourage resource sharing across the network. As a tangible example, there were multiple different programs of study across the network towards the New Zealand Diploma in Business. That means multiple different course descriptors, multiple teaching teams, multiple assessment approaches, and also ad hoc transfer of students from one institution to the other. Even if they were doing the same qualification, it was often hard to match the papers up. Now we have a single shared program with common course descriptors, and these course descriptors will be used across multiple campuses and also at a distance. Now, from this context, there are multiple opportunities here for assessment practice, but also many risks. And we thought a really good way of actually starting this webinar would be to have a bit of a chat storm. So in the chat area, we'd be really interested in viewing your sense of the opportunities for assessment in a unified program context, but also the risks. And I'll just pause now to give a few moments for you to add some O's and R's in the chat. So given that we've got 25 institutions coming together, suddenly sharing the same course descriptor, able to share assessments, what are some of the opportunities for that, starting with O? What are some of the risks, starting with R? So let me just pause and just give the chat time to populate with some ideas and reflections. Yeah, thanks, Rose. You hit it right out of the park with the first one. So yep, scale certainly is an opportunity. Great, yes, please do keep them coming. Great, some excellent ideas coming through there. Just give a few more moments for some other ideas to come through. Thanks, Lillian. Great, that's a good window into some of the challenges we've been facing, but also the opportunities that have arisen too. Great, excellent, okay. So enter our focus on enduring assessment. Now, our business division, the Open Polytechnic business division, has long separated the development of assessment from teaching staff, primarily because we develop courseware for online distance delivery. So we develop assessment tasks for the likes of the New Zealand Diploma of Business for our own students, and our own students can start on a monthly basis. In fact, our objective is to make any course available any day of the week to any learner, which of course adds another layer to the opportunity and also risks associated with this. So we've got a dedicated assessment center, we've got a team of assessment developers, and reuse of assessment is already something we do. So we're taking some steps to share the assessment tasks we develop across the network for some programs. Now there's clearly some really good benefits to this, as also has been indicated in the chat. Now there's more intentional design, so we can actually develop assessment as and for learning. We can involve assessment experts and actually get that expertise across every assessment that's put forward. We can invest more in assessment development because we know that they can be used again and again, protecting the size of that investment. There's more scope for large-scale innovation. If you have a single team doing it or a single area of expertise, any good innovative ideas you can roll out fairly quickly across multiple assessment areas. We can achieve consistency of marking through check marking, and Open Polytechnic is very good at that. There's a single point of moderation, so things are far simpler. And of course, it's also more efficient. But sharing those same assessments across an entire network also runs multiple risks. And it's been really good seeing all of the O's come through in the chat as well. So firstly, there's potential for contract cheating based on a single assessment task. And Phil Dawson, I think, highlighted this in the webinar series last year. There's a potential release of model answers and even marking sheets, which of course immediately torpedoes an assessment being reused. It could, again, as was highlighted in the chat, it could also stagnate innovation. So we're not actually enabling anyone to come up with fresh ideas and use those outside of that central design team. There's less academic staff member engagement and ownership of the assessment. And we know too that changing assessment regularly is one of the principles from Forsyth for avoiding academic misconduct. So some of the themes we're aware of, and also those that guided us to our enduring assessment approach, are these ones. Sorry, there's, okay, there we go, the slide has come up. So various characteristics, various principles that we would all agree should be characteristic of good assessment. The principles of validity, reliability, manageability, clarity, satisfaction for the marker, and also enjoyability for the student. Now, integrity is a particular issue facing contemporary education, mainly through contract cheating, but also more recently, perhaps through AI. Well, Nathaniel and I think it's time to add two more characteristics to this mix: resilience and endurance. Now, we all had to pivot our practice through COVID-19, and mainly through the difficulties of on-site invigilation. In New Zealand, we also faced this in the last few weeks with Cyclone Gabrielle, which we decided to respond to by changing invigilated exams into alternative forms of assessment. We had to do that with a fairly small runway. Resilience of assessment might also include making it more difficult for contract cheating and making it easier for the format to quickly adjust to other modes. Now, endurance becomes important for the reuse of assessments, particularly across different teaching teams. Now, in our sharing arrangements, we've already noticed differences in assessment practice for academic staff across our network. Some academics share model answers, some share marking sheets, and there's also different timing of assessment, which can, of course, advantage later learners. Despite all of this and all of the potential we have here, there also seems a bit of a complacency around assessment design and also an over-reliance on knee-jerk policies. In some disciplines, let's be honest, we've been assessing the same way for a very long time. And often this means that assessments are no longer authentic or even appropriate to industry. But because we've always done it this way, we just keep doing the same thing. Assessment's often not scrutinised enough and not always seen as a professional development area, which means traditional options continue to be taken forward even when recognising what technology might afford us with now. So there's a need for us to be able to design assessment that isn't compromised by cheating, while still being able to be used at scale and also reused with confidence. And we think that creating assessments that are enduring is key to this. Of course, we could also be off track. One of Rachel Forsyth's 5 ways of avoiding academic misconduct, in fact, the first, is changing assignments regularly. Well, we'd like to suggest that with the right design, we can create assignments that can be confidently used again and again. And I'll hand over to Nathaniel now, who'll describe our initial steps into this new area of practice. Nathaniel, you might be muted.
I was muted, thank you. Thanks. We decided we needed to come up with a way to create assessment that can be reused with confidence while remaining valid and reliable. Assessment that endures for more than one course offering. Assessment that can potentially be reused multiple times if we're able to confirm that it's still valid and reliable. We proposed a project to explore whether we can design enduring assessment and what that might look like. There was some resistance from several areas, in particular around academic integrity, which is totally understandable, as well as with introducing a new approach to designing assessment that is potentially unfamiliar and untested. The project set out to define enduring assessment, explore possibilities to design enduring assessment, identify barriers and possible solutions, as well as understand the cost implications. So we started off by looking to define what we even mean by enduring assessment. And we needed to focus primarily on the institutional needs of the Open Polytechnic. At the Open Polytechnic, we have different offering types. Mark's already alluded to this a little bit, but we have trimesters, so up to 3 offerings per year. Monthly blocks, where students can enroll and begin in a course at the start of every month, so therefore up to 12 offerings per year. And we're also moving towards open 365 enrolment, allowing students to enroll and start on any day of the year. This is perhaps the most complex, with theoretically up to 365 offerings per year. Students could therefore be starting a course or submitting assessments in that course on any day of the year. Some students may have already received their grade and feedback, while others are just starting the assessment. So we came up with this definition, that enduring assessment is robust enough to continue to be valid and reliable across multiple offerings with minimal design input for a minimum of 1 year. While we aim to design enduring assessment up front, it won't be confirmed as enduring until it has gone through one offering, as well as a post-assessment moderation event after its first use. We recognise that some assessments will endure for longer than others. If designed appropriately, we believe that some assessments could potentially endure indefinitely. However, due to the nature of some programs or courses, others may only endure for a relatively short period. Through our project exploration, we came up with these options for enduring assessment. Situated tasks have been used in some way in assessment for a long time, but bringing in students' own context is one of the most straightforward ways to create enduring assessment, where it's appropriate for the course or learning outcomes. Situating the assessment in a student's own context means that we're not relying on a single example or case study that everyone uses, and that sometimes produces only one type of correct response. When designed well, situated assessment can help demonstrate higher levels of student ability as they have transferred their learning into their own world. Variations have a core task containing variables that are randomly changed so that not all students have the exact same assessment. We may have multiple variations of a single assessment within a course that are randomly assigned to learners. Another option for a variation is to have a core task and produce a new variation for each offering. This means that In each offering, all learners receive the same assessment, but for each subsequent offering, it's changed with only a small amount of effort. Interactive oral assessment involves a genuine, unscripted conversation with a student in real time. It gives the student an opportunity to talk openly about their learning within a specific context, responding to prompts from the assessor. This style of assessment promotes academic integrity and allows a demonstration of in-depth learning in a short period of time. In our project, we also considered live video presentations as well as quizzes with random video response activities as possible and during assessment approaches. However, we're yet to trial these. So I'll just have a short look at a couple of examples here. In designing assessments with variations, our principal learning designer, Cynthia, who's actually in the webinar here, came up with the approach of using Excel to capture the variables and using mail merge in Word to bring those together. So in some ways, relatively old technology, but it has demonstrated an approach that works. In this instance shown, for a course in construction, students were asked to demonstrate knowledge of structural principles. They were given a scenario which contained variables related to building purpose, for example, is it a library, a medical centre or a gym? Building structure, timber frame, steel frame, precast concrete. Soil types, fine or coarse grain, and specific soil content. As the buildings had a different purpose, they also required different layouts and rooms, etc. So what you're seeing in this slide actually is just a couple of screenshots from the Excel spreadsheet. These screenshots are from the actual task or two variations. So it demonstrates some of the variables within one task of the assessment. For pre-assessment moderation purposes, we sent all the variations to the moderator and highlighted the variables. The final student version did not include the highlights that are shown here. We've learned through the first offerings using some of these assessments that in some cases the variations didn't actually result in different student responses. They just made the scenario slightly different. So while we had a subject matter expert supporting the development of the assessments, it's really important to check that the resulting responses from students will actually be slightly different due to the changes being made. This interactive oral assessment will follow on from the previous task that you just saw. We're yet to pilot this assessment as we want to ensure we have everything set up to prepare our fully online distance learners. Currently, we have a different type of assessment in the course. We've designed this interactive oral assessment with support from Danielle Logan-Fleming from Griffith University. We're looking for students to really demonstrate that they understand the learning outcome through an unscripted conversation. The first task of this assessment asks students to prepare and submit some sketches based on the first assessment. These form the basis of the discussion. Students are marked on their sketches, but the bulk of the marks for this assessment are within the 10-minute interactive oral. Hopefully you can kind of see from this rubric that the focus of the interactive oral is on students demonstrating their knowledge of the learning outcome, not on their presentation skills. As mentioned, we're looking to ensure we have everything set up in this course with some formative opportunities for students to become familiar with this type of assessment before we trial it. So some of our experiences that we've found. We had good support from all involved at the start of the project, but we encountered some hesitancy as we were nearing the end. As we were coming up with a new way to design and potentially deliver assessment, we realised we needed to have regular touch points and communication with academic staff throughout the project to ensure they remained on board with the approach. As the assessment started to be rolled out for use, we discovered that while we understood from academic staff and assessors that they had everything they needed, we discovered that we actually needed more guidance for markers as to how the assessments worked. in particular for the variations. We also found that we needed to inform students that they may receive a different assessment to someone else in the cohort, as it was causing confusion for students and therefore a lot of extra work for academic staff. As you can imagine, it's very important to test assessments. Every variation needs to be tested to ensure they work as expected and the variables make sense, as well as testing the systems to ensure how we understood they would work was actually how they would work. While we did test, there were still some challenges that arose as we started to roll them out. We've already made a number of tweaks to ensure everything is clear both for students and assessors. With regards to cost, we won't be fully sure until we've developed further enduring assessment, but we do believe overall costs should reduce as we become more efficient with developing them. Some of the upfront costs may be higher, for example, developing variations using mail merge, as it can take quite some time to set these up. However, once the system is set up, creating new variations will be a quick task for a learning designer. And if we're not having to recreate assessments for every offering, the overall cost will reduce.
Great. So you can see some of the benefits that we're anticipating from this. Firstly, of course, there is increased capacity for assessment development. We have a team of around about 10 learning designers who currently focus on developing assessments, and they've got a limited bandwidth in terms of the amount of assessments they can actually do. If we're able to adopt more enduring approaches, we can actually make sure that that capacity is well used. Of course, important for our network in Te Pūkenga, there's greater opportunity to share assessment, and not just across institutions, but also across different enrolment patterns. So one thing we're really convinced of is 365 access, any course, any time, is a really important part of flexible learning. So if we're able to actually develop enduring assessment tasks, it gives us a lot more confidence in actually sharing those assessments more broadly. The opportunities for invigilation are also there, so interactive oral assessment, Q&As and live webinars all give us opportunity to make sure that it is actually the learner's understanding that's being assessed. There's some real sensitivities around that at the moment. We think that some of these enduring approaches are really, really useful, not just for the sake of providing enduring tasks, but also making sure that it is actually the learner being assessed. I've mentioned the anytime enrolment. The personal pace is also quite important here too. As education can be more flexible, the ability to be assessed at any time, not just according to a set timetable, is going to be quite an important part, I think, for flexible education moving forward. And again, enduring assessment gives us a great deal of confidence in entering into that space. And last, and possibly not least, but last on purpose, is a decrease in overall development costs. In the Te Pūkenga accounting schema, we can actually capitalize any assessments that can be reused for more than a year and cost over a certain amount to develop. So there's some really good accounting advantages here as well, speaking as a manager more so than an educationist. So we've given you a bit of a window into what we're doing and also how enduring assessment might be taken forward. And we thought we'd spend as much time as possible just in questions and conversation. So we just want to pause now. Firstly, are there any questions? If not, there are some we have, and we'd also like to invite any participant to provide some perspectives on these questions as well. So Matthew, can we leave it there and open up for some questions and comments? Hi, Matthew.
Yes, sorry. Yes, questions. If people would like to ask a question via the microphone, please use the hands up symbol, which is the little person icon in the bottom center of the screen, or you can write your question into the text chat. That would be fine as well.
Thanks. I know that there are some questions in the chat that we probably haven't seen or engaged with. So if you have put something in there we haven't addressed yet, please do put it in again.
There's one there about reluctance for students to take part in oral assessments. Have you had any experience or advice about that? I know the Griffith University folks have got tons of advice on that. People can go and watch their webinar, but I'm just wondering what the experience in New Zealand with vet sector students was.
Yes, so it's, I'll take that one. we're actually still to pilot using the interactive oral assessments, so we don't know the level of resistance. We do already have some a little bit of oral assessment taking place within some of our courseware and some of our courses, and it seems to be going okay. But yes, it's a little bit of something to watch as we pilot it to see how that goes. What we need to be doing first is actually making sure there are formative activities set up for students to get used to the idea of doing an oral assessment, because it is quite different to what's typically provided through our courses.
Yes, I was going to mention that. So yeah, Griffith University's method was very, formative, scaffolding students towards doing those interactive orals. I believe one of the lecturers was also did a video of themselves and then showed the students, so a video of themselves doing the task or a similar task, and then they showed the class this video. I guess you could do that via, via Moodle or online, and have students critique the teacher's effort at doing the task. I think that sort of broke down a few barriers as well.
I see a question there from Melissa. Melissa, I'm just wondering what an RTO is. Are you able to just briefly unpack that acronym for me?
Registered Training Organisation. I assume this is in Australia.
Right.
Basically, a vet sector training organisation is licensed by the government to provide vet sector training. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Which
right.
could
so
be,
the question is,
government supported or private for profit. So, yeah.
Great, thanks. So the question is, how can we put these flexible assessment ideas forward and back it up with efficiency? I think, Melissa, what's really provided the backing for us is the sheer scale at which we operate. So it means that things have to be flexible, that they need to run through fairly simple systems if they're going to work. I'm not sure if any of these approaches would be that helpful if you're dealing with quite a small scale organization. We've got multiple campuses now and also unified programs. So it does give us an opportunity to also change systems and processes to help these things work. So yeah, I have some empathy for you in terms of it being a very complex process to adjust even a small area where you are now. I think if you are interested in the benefits, getting those back office systems right and those processes clear is going to be really important. So Nathaniel, you've answered Mike's ones. Simon, hey, good to see you. Are there particular disciplines that lend themselves more to chosen approaches? I think they're fairly generic tools. So, I mean, at the moment, we've applied them to a construction diploma and also accounting. So there's a little bit of variety there already. But I think things like interactive oral assessments lend themselves to quite a broad brush of disciplines.
I was also thinking about the way you structure the individual tasks and questions and things, how to scale those. I noted the spreadsheet method. Have you used any, LMS, learning management system, Moodle features, or third-party software that will do this sort of thing? We have had a couple of presentations from a colleague. I think they were from Canterbury, University of Canterbury in New Zealand, that did sort of a similar idea with, they built an online platform to support it. So I'm just wondering if you were investigating sort of, software solutions to help you scale that reusability.
We haven't so far. The learning platform we use, iQualify, has the option of having different variations within the system, so we can load, for example, up to 10 different variations which are randomly provided out to learners. But at this stage, no, we haven't explored specifically how we can create that kind of mail merge randomization in other software.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, there are solutions out there, so have a look at our past webinars. Get in touch with the folks at Canterbury. Yep. Rose, you have your virtual hand up. Would you like to turn on your microphone and ask a question?
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering to what extent students had been involved in the design of this assessment, and whether that was something you considered, because I have seen some really good examples as an external examiner where students have actually been central to designing their own assessment, and I think by that way you get a lot more motivation and engagement with the task if it's actually something that they've jointly created rather than having something given to them.
I think that that's a really good potential technique. We are constrained quite a bit in our TVET sector by needing to meet quite stringent learning outcomes, which does quite heavily guide the sorts of assessments that we can offer. But it is quite common practice to ask learners to come up with their own assessment opportunities that might meet those learning outcomes, to propose those and also submit them. So yeah, I'd imagine that too would be a very effective, enduring approach. In terms of student input into this, we did need to take the approach through our academic committee. There are some student representatives there, but their comments are really the only engagement we've done. Although we have done some testing. Nathaniel, you want to talk a bit about that?
Sorry, testing on which? Sorry, I was reading a question.
Oh, sorry, yeah, through the construction areas, we did a bit of testing. Not so much, oh, they were past students, weren't they, who passed the assessment before?
We did some testing with the interactive oral with some of our markers, and actually just trialing those out and to see where the challenges were, both from a student perspective as well as a marker perspective. We've had a number of our assessments, the variations now go through into courses themselves and be used. And overall they're going well, other than the few teething issues when I think initially when students discovered, oh, I've got a different assessment to someone else in this course, which I think caused a bit of confusion. See a question there from Rebecca about the format of the IOA and what measures are in place to ensure they're fair and the oral is not impacted by one teacher more than another. Yeah, I think it's a really good point and something we have considered quite a lot. I think a big part of this comes down to the actual rubric that's being used and how that's been designed, because we don't want it's not a Viva, it's not an oral exam, it's supposed to be a conversation, and so there's kind of prompts and guides, I guess, to support learners through the conversation. So it's really important that there's that assessors understand where they might be introducing bias, just sometimes quite naturally. We did come across that a little bit in our testing with an assessor, where they did, hey, that's really good, or that's a great answer, or something like that, which actually does kind of introduce a little bit of bias. So yeah, I think the training is really, really important for assessors there, and also making sure that they're staying within, I guess, the bounds of the rubric.
Question from Nadia about the comparison between the time taken from a teacher to make oral assessments versus marking written assessments outside of class. So yeah, I thought that was a bit of a no-brainer too, Nadia, that it would be more efficient. But in the costings that we put together, estimating the marking load, it actually came out quite close. Once you can also factor in the cost of developing the assessment task itself. So I think it is more efficient at scale. Nathaniel, you've done some analysis on that.
Yeah, and they can be quite similar. Some of our assessments take 45 minutes to an hour to mark, our written ones, and the intention is for these interactive orals to be 10 to 15 minutes with about 5 minutes of extra wrap-up marking time afterwards. So the time spent on it should actually reduce and therefore costs come down.
So Simon picked up on Rose's point about having students develop their own assessment tasks. And part of the challenge being developing students' assessment literacy, what investments being put into this aspect. It's not something we're doing a lot of, Simon, because of our TVET nature. Our qualifications usually end at level 7 degree level. I think for postgraduate, we'd probably be taking that sort of thing on. But for us, we're not actually asking students to develop assessment literacy. It's not a learning outcome of their experience with us. But I'd imagine in other institutions, it's going to be quite a desirable skill, especially at the postgraduate level, to do that.
really keen to check out some of these links and that have been shared. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're interested too in the questions that we have. We think endurance is actually quite an important factor for assessment development, and we're just wondering about people's thoughts on whether or not there's a sufficient case to actually begin talking about endurance as just a standard way of designing assessment. I see some more questions coming in too. So Reid, did you check that different polytechnics were teaching things to the same standard and depth? Yeah, that they will need to now because we are dealing with unified programs. So all the course descriptors will be the same. All the learning outcomes will be the same. So yeah, there will need to be similar standard and depth across the sector. And because the assessments we design are designed to assess the learning outcomes, the polytechnics will need to teach to the same standard and depth. So it's almost a circular answer there. Do you think all assessments should take this form, or do you need to keep a varied range of different types? Nathaniel, what do you think?
In terms of should they be enduring, I guess our goal is to make as many of them enduring as possible. I guess the ones we've shown here, I don't think is an exhaustive list. It's some of the ones we've explored last year. You know, but if we can make assessments that are enduring, then I think we should aim to do that, because that, well, it benefits us in a lot of ways, because we don't need to keep creating assessments every offering. We've had some that, you know, we do create or have created for a long time assessments every offering, which is quite time consuming. It also means as a learning design team that are responsible for creating assessments, there are some courses that perhaps we need to get to that we haven't been able to update because we've been focused on the ones that have to be continually replaced. But it definitely should be a varied range of types. Totally agree with that. I think our students need to have that opportunity to do different types of assessment as well.
Dr. John Willard, so your question there, does the assessment that has a featured oral element disproportionately disadvantage any student that finds that form of interaction challenging relating to neurodiversity and inclusion? Yeah, I think there's certainly scope for that. One thing we have been really quite keen on in our trials is to make sure that learners have as much formative opportunity as possible to actually have just a conversation with someone via Teams. It's not standing someone up in front of a large group. It really is a one-on-one call. It is recorded, certainly, but recall too, the marking guides are designed to not actually assess the learner's articulation. It's more of their understanding. So I think that's a challenge we're going to have to rise to, because there will be neurodiverse students who will require a slightly different approach perhaps. But at the moment, because it is a conversation between a single person with plenty of opportunity to practice beforehand, we're fairly satisfied that it's going to be low risk on that mine. Language style or dialect issue? Again, I'm hoping not.
Yeah,
they are recorded.
Yeah, my impression of what the Griffith University people did is, you know, the international students whose English is not a first language weren't particularly disadvantaged, because the key to, I think, achieving this is in the scaffolding and in the practice, the formative stuff for the students. And it's not necessarily about their language proficiency per se, but the ideas, their ability to respond to the questions. Which, you know, yes, it's more of a challenge in a ESL environment, but you're, I guess, also taking that into consideration. If you know the student's language is not, you know, first language is not English, and they've been examined on this topic of, you know, physics or something like that, then their language abilities is taken into consideration in the assessment process. But I do think it's about also confidence building for the students, and letting them know what the criteria for the assessment is. You know, if your English is not great, it's not going to affect your marks. We will have a conversation about it. You know, it's a conversation. I think that, you know, ability to be able to have a conversation with the student, then you get a sense of what they know and what they don't know. Even if their language ability is not so great, the ideas should still emerge, or, you know, the knowledge should still emerge. So yeah, that's just my comment on it.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's also important to realise too that many employers now see the ability to present and talk in a dialogue about a subject as actually quite a desirable graduate skill. So that too is part of the factor that makes this a very useful approach. So comment from Simon, should this be at the core of assessment design? Should be to provide opportunities for students to generate? Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so the output of the assessments themselves make it a meaningful approach. Yeah, thanks, Simon.
Interesting, you mentioned ipsative. Yes, very much underused approach in higher education, I would say, given we all have, standards-based assessment regimes rather than ipsative-based regimes. But yeah, interesting idea.
Rose has also mentioned peer assessment. I think absolutely, Rose, that's something else that could be added into the mix here.
I'm not sure. Mike has asked the question, how do you check the student in the remote? Oh, it's actually the student, not somebody else.
Yeah, I answered that further down. So photo bearing ID as a first step.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I guess, have to have some form of relatively rigorous ID, government issued ID, passports, driver's licenses.
Yeah.
That is
Mike's just
reflective of the person
AI.
in the video on the Zoom session or the Teams session or whatever it is you're doing. So, yeah.
Speech recognition with speech synthesis. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
An interesting part of the using ID is, we have had some questions asked, well, what about privacy for learners, showing ID and having other information on your ID cards, driver's licenses, whatever, showing if it's being recorded. And so with, the simple call we made is actually we show the ID, get the ID shown before the recording starts as well.
Right. I mean, we had a similar issue with Zoom exams, where we had group Zoom exams and students had to show their IDs. We asked the students to just put sticky tape over the bits that they didn't want to share. So as long as we could see their student ID number, then or their name and their photo, that was adequate for our ID purposes. Because obviously, once we know who the photo is and the ID, we can match it up to the ID database. So yeah. I guess it depends on what sort of ID databases you've got to be able to check. But
yeah, I mean, it's interesting as well because most of our assessment is written and submitted through an LMS.
Yes,
we can't see that the student's done it. So this is an extra step that is providing some verification, even if yes, okay, I'm sure with AI we can get around that these days, but or we'll be able to soon. But yes, it's still more than many are currently doing.
I think Mike's solving all of our problems in chat. AI deepfake assessors and AI deepfake students. Yeah, it's all right, Mike. We'll make a policy against that.
I like your response there, Rebecca.
There was a funny comment in one of the webinars today about ChatGPT, with the students using ChatGPT to produce the assessment task, and the university using AI like ChatGPT to assess the student. It'll be a robot being assessed by a robot, and all the job for the humans will be do is to press a button to submit it. That was quite funny. But I guess we need to do things to, principles.
To be honest, I'm sorry, I'm actually working with ChatGPT now, and sorry, if you make an exam that can be answered by ChatGPT, you haven't done enough thinking on your exam. So I think there's a lot of panic there, and you should try it yourself. It's really fascinating, but if you look at it, it's the real thinking. You still need a human to do that. Up until now, I don't know how it's going to be in a year time, but up until now, I'm sorry, I think people should calm down a bit.
I agree. It was a flippant, jokey comment. Yes. There's obviously a lot of perspectives on it. There are many different types of tools. We do have to rethink assessment. I think it's a bit of a wake-up call for that. Getting away from essays and multiple choice, which are, we did an analysis of the top 5 assessment tasks used at the university, and they were quiz, i.e. online quiz, a generic topic called participation, but that's not meaningful. Then it went to essay, examination as in invigilated, and report. So, you know, the variety of assessment tasks that, and there were about 50 different assessment task types in our curriculum management system, but those ones that came up on top by far, it tells you how little assessment has really changed over the years. And it really does need to change. I mean, transforming assessment has been screaming about this for the last 13 years, and it's still a topical thing. So, yes.
Yeah. I wonder if that term endurance then, Mathew, might be quite useful there, because clearly things like rolling out the same essay question every year, it just shouldn't be considered as being sound practice at all, because it's just simply not an enduring approach. And of course, with the other opportunities now to cheat, I think that the time has come for us to actually introduce something like endurance into the conversation.
Certainly. I mean, and part of that will be considering the use of AI as part of the skill set. I mean, AI literacy, AI skills are going to be survival skills, you know, in the not too distant future, if not already in some professions. So, you know, if our students graduate without being able to use the modern tools of the trade, including artificial intelligence tools, we're leaving them at a disadvantage, I think. So, I mean, in all of the university discussions I've been in, and quite a lot of them, different webinars and things, none of the universities in Australia have proposed banning it. It's about how do we use it effectively? You know, how do we integrate this into our assessments? That's going to take a bit of time to think through. You know, the TEXA webinar that was on, when was that? 2 o'clock, I think, today. That was the Cradle Deakin / TEXA joint webinar. A lot of brilliant discussion in there. So if you're not onto that series, folks, get onto it. The recordings will be out on that. So, you know, I was also at a webinar just before this at the University of Hong Kong, and they were talking about it. Even though it's banned, you know, officially it's banned in Hong Kong, the university there is, you know, thinking about how they're going to use it. They're writing policy for it. They're trying to guide their teachers in using it. I think there is a recognition in the education by the educators, not necessarily the politicians, but by the educators, that, you know, the world has changed and you have to adapt or die. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everyone. I think we can possibly leave it there with our thanks. It's been a real pleasure being able to share some of our experiences with you, and thank you so much for the conversation and the text chat. There's plenty of good links here, as Nathaniel mentioned, for us to follow up on. So many thanks, everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
You're most welcome. If there are any final questions, we still have some time, but otherwise, thank you very much, Nathaniel and Mark. It was great to see what you've been doing, and we'll be looking forward to seeing the results of your pilots and your implementation in due course.
Thanks, Mathew.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mathew.
Okay, looks like we're giving our thanks, so I will stop the recording.